I always forget to put it. I always forget.
No worries, that's fine.
I know. Calling the meeting to order. Take the roll call, please.
If you just want to say everybody's names.
Tim.
Present.
Present. Jared Frank, present.
And then David is excused,
Right. He's,
Yeah. and our students, we may have one, but Brian was unable to join us.
Oh, okay. Okay. I will now read the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. Excuse me. Approval of agenda and meeting minutes. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay,
That's still not how this works.
I'm sorry.
I said that's still not how this works.
I know, I
We're-
always
You can
forget.
say, you can just say, like, are there any questions or any
Any-
changes? And then you can see, we can just approve both by comment.
Approved by common consent.
Yeah,
And I,
the trick is just giving people the opportunity.
okay, all right, and I did see that we had some public comments.
You did have a couple come in over email, yes.
I got one hand raised.
And you have one hand
Oh, okay.
raised.
Who is it? Mary Wichter. Let me promote analyst.
And I used my timer.
Hello,
Uh,
good evening. This is Mary Wichter. I've been in Sammamish 24 years. I did email in a short thing with a couple photos attached to try to help see what we can do for trees. I think you guys are a fantastic commission with excellent leadership. Sorry Rose isn't here, and all the people participating. You've had really wonderful discussions all year. But I started advocating for stormwater and problems in my area in 2015, and at that time, there was no urban forestry management plan. And then when they created it, they threw a whole bunch of things into it. And then it's been kind of pushed out and pushed out. But the trees are super important. And there are some simple things that people can do. And when the East Lake Sammamish Trail was started, we did a lot of advocacy to say, hey, when you do that trail, can you clean up some of the invasive plants and the huge blackberries and, you know, the ivy that's growing on trees? And they did a pretty good job, but as you drive around, you can still see places. So if you see tall trees, you'll see ivy growing up them. And the holly and the ivy are great for English Christmas carols, but they're invasive here and they really take over. So one thing I've noticed is the trees look like they have stockings, that the ivy goes all the way up. And when I was a native plant steward, just learning from LB Jones and the rest of the crew, I said, hey, how bad is this? And they said, well, it's pretty bad because the higher it climbs and gets to the sun, it will bloom and then it will spread even more. And any pieces that fall that are green, they can resprout. So we learned in 2019 through 2020, when I got trained, you're supposed to just cut the ivy back around the trunk, pull it back with your hands, and then any of the shoots going up, even if you can't pull them off the tree, they will die and then the leaves will brown out and it won't continue growing. So I sent you some photos of a house right across the road from me where I have permission to work from the owner, where the ivy itself is like bigger around than my arm or even a tough guy's arm. And it really makes a difference to the tree. So I think if owners could be informed about what to do, that would really help. Often Himalayan blackberry grows in the same area where the ivy is taken over. Himalayan blackberry has like a 5-leaf. And even if you can't pull them out, if you can just trim the main stem, which is called a cane, to like 12 inches or 18 inches so you can see it, and then take that away and put it in the yard waste recycle, then they can't resprout. It takes them the next year. They don't have photosynthesis and the root doesn't grow larger, and then the roots can eventually be pulled out, grubbed out, or removed. But I think if we did those two things, it would make a hell of a difference. Some HOAs might be interested, some individual people might be interested, and some owners, what we need is some basic training. And I got my original training through Kathy Curry, who used to be the wetlands biologist at the city, and then through Washington Native Plant Steward. And I know Jan Bird sometimes speaks at your meeting. So hopefully this is an idea that could move forward. It's a great time of year to do it in the winter, because that way everything will die before the spring and won't sprout. Thank you for the time today, and I hope you have an excellent meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have no more hands raised.
And we have no one in the room. We did it under 3 minutes. Should be great. And we're out of here.
How did everybody survive the storm? Well, you were out of town.
Yeah,
not
it's
gonna
just
ask.
fine. It was not fun.
It was okay for about the first day, and I'm like, oh, it's camping, and then after about day 3, it's like, okay, ready to be done. All right, commission action, the climate action plan. Prioritization, you wanna look at.
So I'll jump in. This is just the report out that we promised you all from the last meeting, right? When you went through and did your prioritization. So the first grid that you see on this agenda item, right, shows you the sustainability items that are currently in the city's 2025-2026 work plan. And as a part of that, we did a catch-all, right? That was climate action plan implementation. And then you all, through the prioritization work that you did last month, right, came up with what that prioritization would be. And you remember we sort of said, you get $6, right? And we did it, the different things, you know, 1, 2, or 3. And so you can see where the group's voting was, and then at the end of the day, where we've ended up. So on the bottom of page 6 of your packet where it says primary actions, right? These are the 4 that we're going to initially focus on. So we have BEU 4.1, identify grant and partnership opportunities to develop and implement a community energy conservation and GHG emissions reduction education program. So that's again part of that overall changing hearts and minds and educating folks. The second one is to engage with various partners around electric vehicle share. So we will do some initial work just to even see whether there's an interest from the industry, right? I'm having discussions here. The third one, sorry.
When you say industry, what is?
It would be the car share
Okay.
industry, right?
Okay.
And then the third one, collaborate on education around low impact drought resistant landscape development and design. And then the third one, again, more partnerships for an education campaign on sustainable commute alternatives. So we did add in there secondary actions because it may be that 1 or 2 of those. So for instance, if we get no interest from any car sharing organization, right? Then we added the secondary actions so that we could go ahead and go to those next if the first 4 don't work. So you can see where those are, one of which is the waste diversion, which is basically, you know, in businesses, largely restaurants. The second one would be using our own making sure our own landscapers are using native plants, drought tolerant, that sort of thing. And then the last one, there's again, more education on irrigation management. So I think it's really important. We asked you to do a bunch of work last month to do this prioritization and wanted to make sure that we were reporting out on what that looked like. So any questions about any of that?
The secondary ones were pulled, I assume, from our.
Yep, they're all,
Yeah.
it's just the
the next best or whatever.
It's kind of the next,
Popular.
yeah, exactly, right, you got your prom king and queens here on primary, right, and then the court is
Got it.
there under the secondary.
So Rachel, I have a question. The header in this was 2025, 2026 proposed work plan, but these primary actions are just for next year. Is that right?
These are just for next year.
Okay.
Yep, and we'll do this again, right, into 2026. The overall catch-all for the biennium is that cap implementation,
Okay.
right? But then we're asking you, okay, what in the cap implementation do you want us to focus on and prioritize?
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. So hopefully that lines up with your memories of the prioritization effort that we did and makes sense to all of you, and we'll start working on that. Are there any questions that I can answer or?
Can I assume for some of these where there's partnerships that we might have an organization come speak to us at a meeting to help further whatever action we're trying to implement?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a potential.
For some of these, I'm not aware who the partners are. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, so for instance, let's look at BEU 4.1, right?
Mhm.
So as you all know, we're part of the Energy Smart East Side effort, right? And they've been doing heat pumps. We're gonna talk a little bit later about the solar campaign. But one of the things that maybe we could talk to that Energy Smart East Side partnership about is bringing that energy conservation and weatherization efforts into, right? I personally live in a 100-year-old house, and I can promise you, if I did some weatherization, I would save a lot of money and a lot of, fossil fuels, right? So that is an area that we could look to expand that work if we're looking at things like that. So that's one example.
How does the weight factor into the trade-off? Like say TLU 713 doesn't make it, do we just pull up WE 1.4 with the highest rank secondary interaction, or do we go to WR 2.2 because it's a 1?
I think it would just sort of depend, right? It would depend. We would come in and say, okay,
Just didn't
like
work.
this didn't work, but we think we can do this too, even though the one didn't work, right? It's not. It was more, the weights were really more along the lines of when we did that initial prioritization, we didn't want all of the priorities to be big heavy lifts, right? Because we knew we wouldn't be able to then be
I
successful.
don't remember it being either or, it was
So
thinly sliced.
this way we have some flexibility.
And for the primary actions, what are the deliverables? Like, how do we demonstrate we've met these actions?
Well, I think from my perspective, TLU 7.3 is very concrete, right? It's getting electric car share vehicle in here. If
Okay.
we are successful, then we would have an EV that was a car share, like a Zip car, or there are other ones out there that I don't know the name.
Or there'd be an article in the monthly sustainability newsletter or something like that?
Well, first we'd have to get the car share here.
Right, but I'm saying, if
Right.
that happened.
If
then-
that happened,
right.
then we would do all this other stuff around it, right?
Okay.
If there isn't a market for a car share here in Sammamish, right,
Right.
then we would just say that one didn't work. We're going on to the next one.
Okay.
So I guess one of my questions is, back to your point of who's responsible for going after the car share companies?
We are,
Initiating.
staff is.
Staff,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
you're
Okay.
giving us the prioritization and the
Yeah,
direction,
okay.
right? And let's say Zipcar says, yes, that's great. Where would you like
Okay.
us to put it?
Okay.
Then that would be something we would come back to all of you and say, okay. And let's just say car share A company
Right.
is willing to put 3 EV car shares in the city of Sammamish. We would come back to this group and say, where do you all think would be good, right? And then we could have that sort of more of a higher level policy discussion. And then we could go back to car share A and say, Sustainability Commission thinks they should be here, kind of a thing.
So if hypothetically we had that discussion are there gonna be restraints on where that car could be put? I mean, it's not gonna be in my driveway. But would it be in the Safeway parking lot or?
It would most likely be in a public parking lot or one of those.
So it could be parked out here.
It could be parked out here, it could be parked at, one of the 4 or 5 different,
Park and rides.
you know,
Parker rides?
a park and ride is a potential.
Yeah.
Um,
Alright.
it's gonna require EV infrastructure, right?
Yes,
So, that makes it maybe a little bit more challenging in some, because I would suspect it would be somewhere on City Hall campus, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
But as I said in the last meeting, I do think that this is a difficult market for a car share company because average household has more than 2 vehicles.
Well, didn't somebody say that our area has one of the highest demographics of EV ownership? in
And
the
there's
area?
that
So,
too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We knew this was gonna be just really sort of a report out, so, we'll start working on some of these and we'll be coming back to you throughout the year to have these discussions.
Yeah, I'm personally, I'm very interested in WE 1.4. On waste division, because I think that so many people still get confused as to how do they get rid of their personal household items.
I agree, but when I heard Rachel say maybe it's a tiered approach, it's like restaurants, grocery stores, tier 1, and maybe residential would be a second phase or.
There's different strategies we could do on WE 1.4, right? I think we continue to try to work on the education, right, about what you can and can't put in your compost and
Right.
recycle, and that's a long
Well,
process, right?
it's all connected, right? So I don't know the exact number, but something like 30% of all food grown in the United States is wasted and goes into landfills.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big contributor of methane gas. And
Huge.
so this interconnects with different other actions that aren't necessarily on the list, but.
Yep, absolutely. So, there, again, under 1.4, the WE 1.4, there could be a number of things, right? One of the things we've talked about is you all have heard of the Ridwell service, I assume,
Yeah.
right?
got it.
There's different versions of it, but we could potentially have some version of it at City Hall where people wanted to drop off, the non-recyclable plastics, right, or things like that. We could do something like that, right? We could work with businesses like we talked about last month, right, to have them transfer over to compostable only materials for to-go stuff, right?
Well, aren't they supposed to be technically in compliance with the law already?
Well, they have to be in compliance with the law, but the law is not that everything has to be compostable. They can't use styrofoam anymore.
Got it.
You
Okay.
can't, you are not supposed to put utensils and stuff like that in there if you're a business unless asked, right? There's some different, the bag issue, but the state law is not that everything has to be compostable. Some
Okay.
communities are. I live in the city of Seattle, everything that has to be compostable, so. That is an option, that is a very large lift, right, that also requires funding. But so there's a variety of different things that we could do, right? To your point about how much food is wasted, one of the number one things that we could do to change our habits is to buy less food, right? If we just started, again, we think about all of this as circular and started at the beginning, right? Then we wouldn't have to talk about how to then, deal with that in our waste stream. So there's a variety of strategies that we can do there.
Yeah.
So, and again, like so much of this stuff, and this is why we are relying so heavily all on you, is it's really just about how do we change behavior,
Right.
right? And that's where the city saying you should do X, Y, or Z versus one of their neighbors, which is all of you saying, you know, we'd like you to join us in this effort is a much stronger platform. So much more likely to be heard.
Yeah, we talked about that before and that it feels very grassroots. It's
And
gonna take
that's-
a long,
That's
a long time.
It's a good segue to the next agenda item. And we don't have to jump into it, but when you are ready, because that's kind of that next part.
Yeah, I think we should move forward. I think that there, you know, Tim and I have had many conversations about this. It's, you can't just show people data. And, oh, it's all terrible and hand wringing and all that. It's like, how am I gonna save money? How am I gonna save money and time, right? So I think that that's gonna be the ticket. We've talked about, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but doing some messaging around campaigns. Because I don't think any of us are completely on the same page as to how we would describe this to people in our own communities. Which even when I have the conversation with my husband, you know, I'm not sure that I'm all that crisp in my own messaging in my own household either.
Yeah, there was an interesting article in Seattle Times sometime this week that was talking about all the initiatives that failed, passed. Went the right way for the
2117, right? The
Yeah.
big one was the 2117,
Yeah.
how they never said climate change
Yes,
was.
they never talked about it. It was
Yep.
health, it was all these
Transportation funding.
immediate things
Yep.
that impact your life.
Yep.
I thought that was pretty interesting and it hits. a lot
Well,
of
and
the
a
same points.
bill, it's like, how boring does it sound like?
Oh, yeah, but
Here's bill number, blah, blah, blah. Most people eyes glaze over, right?
Yeah,
We
but
have to
it's-
personalize it.
yeah, you got a message in the way that
Yeah.
it's the benefit
Yeah.
people, and Steve talks about this all the time, like the savings that you get from the heat pump over the lifespan are pretty big, and that's how you anchor heat pump talk. It's the same thing with any of these, right? Like, how does it, they all ideally also help our lives, right? Like,
Right.
save money if you buy less food and you're not throwing it away, which is throwing away money.
Right.
That's
Right.
a huge win for you as a person. And it also helps the environment. Like those are the angles you take to get people to.
I mean,
do
I
a lot of
agree
these
with all
things.
that, but there's also misperceptions too, like,
Yeah.
the other day I was chatting with a neighbor who, offered me a bottle of plastic bottle of water. I said, no, thanks, I don't like to use plastics. He goes, well, it's recyclable. I'm like, well, actually, it's not, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
I think there's so much confusion as to what plastic's recyclable, what's not.
Yeah.
There's different categories and things like that, right? So that he felt good because he thought he was recycling, but in fact, it wasn't recyclable. Yeah.
Well, we are gonna actually talk through a potential presentation. We have some FAQ for us to work through. But I think first, if you go to on page 8 of the packet, right? We've been talking about this sort of commission-specific outreach plan,
Sure.
right? And so this is the beginning of it, is what's in front of you. It's, you know, you can see the purpose here, which is again, you know, getting out there in the community, right? And talking about this stuff. You can see we have some data there. And so just kind of want to really walk through the nuts and bolts of this. So you can see there towards the bottom, we've got our key stakeholders are residents, HOAs, and community groups with the goals of developing a shared message to communicate around energy efficiency actions. And then conduct a targeted outreach to at least one Sammamish community group per quarter, this is the commission, right?
Right.
So here's our messaging that we just talked about, right? Human health, environmental health, future impacts for families and children. I think particularly in this community, we know how many families are here, and that's a very strong message. And then the monetary savings that Tim mentioned earlier. Page 9. We have different communication tools that we could use, right? We have a PowerPoint that we're gonna run through quickly, which I think is the beginning. I would not say it's buttoned up, but I think it's the beginning for us to start talking about. And then I think we have the opportunity to do postcards. You know, we had talked about maybe targeting a development, right? We have talked about the idea of going door to door in different places. If we wanted to do that, then there would be door hangers or pamphlets or something like that. So those are different tools we could use. The different strategies and tactics, right? Obviously, communications is key. Managing expectations. We're not expecting you to go do the whole city. Want to be clear about that first, but also when we're working with our residents and our neighbors, right? We understand that this is not gonna be immediate, right? We're asking for people to make some incremental change, some big change, right? But everybody can do something.
Yeah, and I would add, it's not too early to start thinking about Earth Day, so under communication tools, what might be appropriate for the booth at Earth Day? You know, we've got, what, 4 months or so?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep, I think that's a great idea. We're gonna talk about that more in a second
Okay.
here. And then coordinating messaging, right? So you all amplifying the messages of the city, right? I don't know how many folks here are on social media, and then if you're on social media, are you following the city's social media? And then if you are following the
Yes.
city's social media, are you amplifying the city's social media, particularly when we're pushing out sustainability related things?
No, my bad.
That's something that that each of you could do to help, right,
Yes.
broaden that. So what we staff would do, right, primarily with Rose taking the lead, is if you wanted to do, say, the targeted neighborhood type thing, see if we could really sway hearts and minds, we would do a postcard a month, a quarter, not a month, that would be too much, a postcard a quarter, right? Amplifying these messages, right? We have the beginning of a PowerPoint, right? We could develop talking points for you, all of that kind of stuff. What we are looking for all of you to do is, again, you know, amplify those social media posts about sustainability, right? Like, share, comment, all of that kind of stuff. Provide us testimonials. We did the Sustainable Sammamish Guide this year. The next version, we really want to feature you all and have it be a neighbor to neighbor conversation, right? So those testimonials, being willing to go on video, right? Steve, can we have somebody come and interview you about how wonderful your new heat pump is, and you could show it off Vanna style?
Not this month, because the bill is gonna be.
Yeah, not this month.
You're gonna have to wait till
Right.
the next bill. I need a legitimate month of heating.
Yes. But
Yes, you
it gives you
can.
an idea of kind of what we're looking for, right? Conducting quarterly outreach, whether it's going to an HOA or a community group or whatever that might be. Again, trying to get some idea whether or not there is any appetite to do any door knocking. And then the last one, you know, as we've been talking about over these past few years, and Nick, past year, and as Nick, you brought up, is the events that we do at farmers markets and Earth Day and that sort of thing. Those are great opportunities for us to continue to amplify this work.
I have a question / thought. We do, you know, the stuff here on, you know, at City Hall, but there's a lot of community events that I don't think we're present at. For example, there was, and this had to do with Christmas. It wasn't a city sponsored event, but last weekend there was a trombone group that was on Beaver Lake and they did Christmas carols. It'd be great if we knew about those kind of things. We could maybe show up. I know, I was bummed I didn't know about it. I saw it afterwards. It looked really fun. There's, you know, Christmas caroling going on tonight at or maybe a string quartet going on at Beaver Lake Lodge. And again, I don't know that necessarily, if we can keep abreast of it and get a schedule of community events, I think we could show up. Or in the summer when we, you know, Sammamish Symphony in the park, Pineland Park. So that I think we're a little more consistent, a little more varied, because we're not all in an HOA. And some of us, you know, our HOAs are so big that it's, I think, if like in Klahani, a little hard to wrangle, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think that even if we get consistency at the farmers markets, right?
Yeah.
For you all being there, like that might be a place to start for 2025, right? Because I want to be realistic about, I know you all have families and jobs and other things to do, so but I think if there's an interest, if it's a city sponsored event and we know about it, we can make a table available for you all to be at. The trombones on Beaver Lake, as cool as that sounds, it's cool because we didn't do it, so.
I know, no, and I realize that, but I'm saying I think that there might be some advantage to having somebody there, not in an official capacity, but just there to advocate.
Yeah.
And evangelize, other than here, we are representatives of the city.
Yep,
Just,
So,
just to talk.
I haven't been able to go to the farmers markets events, but what's the grabber? Why would somebody stop by the booth?
you would be amazed. So we have these little we have the spinning wheel.
We had that at Earth Day, the
Yeah,
wheel.
you have that,
okay,
right?
all
You
right.
pull up, kids love that, then the parents come over, depending on the different, the different themes, there's always a way, and people, to me, the farmer's market has become sort of the town square of Sammamish right now, right? So people are looking to engage,
Okay.
right? They're coming over and saying, what's going on? I mean, we did budget outreach at the farmer's market, which is, some of the more dry stuff that you
Yeah.
could do, and we got to talk to a few hundred people, right? So I highly recommend, not only because the food is amazing too, so.
So I guess what would be helpful for me is if I were to volunteer at a farmer market event, it'd be good to have talking points, right? So one, we're consistent and we're
Okay.
same. Great segue.
Did you guys plan that?
Wow, no, we didn't.
Are they an email?
Yeah, we will also email them out, so, but,
Okay.
so
This
this
is
is
good.
this is sort of what, and again, Rose is amazing, as you all know,
Mhm.
right? So I wanna give credit where credit's due, but these are some really basic. I think it's a good amount of information, right? It's gonna take a little time to seep in and get it, but if we're all working off of these comments, right? And then, and Pam knows this better than any of us, right? And then it's also adding your own personal, which I know I've heard from all of you, either at a meeting or at our coffees or whatever, about why you have your personal passion for this. And as good as these talking points are, you're never gonna get better than kind of what lights that fire in you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, my experience is like, whether it's talking to people or it's giving a presentation to a bunch of executives, you've got about 20 seconds to get people's attention, otherwise they tune out, right?
Yep.
So
Good old elevator
what's the
speech,
elevator
right?
speech?
Yep.
Yeah.
One floor,
Yep.
What's that?
one
One
floor.
floor,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
It's not
exactly.
the Columbia Tower. So I think what Rose was really hoping that we could have a discussion about is what in this outreach plan, this outreach pilot, what seems doable? If you don't wanna go knock on doors, tell us that.
I don't wanna knock on doors.
I
I
didn't
don't
think
wanna knock on
so,
doors.
right. So that's why we're really sort of looking for, how can we build you an outreach plan that you all can do, right? If you don't wanna go to HOAs and you don't wanna go to community groups, but you're willing to say, well, let's focus on the farmer's market or maybe, and these other events like Earth Day and Arbor Day. That's the whole point of this conversation, right? So that we can build a plan that supports you in what you are willing and able to do.
Mhm.
I don't
So
mind doing HOAs.
I wouldn't mind it. How about HOAs? They're supposed to be registered with the city.
We have a list of some that we know about. Not nearly as big as you would think, right?
It's not nearly as big, but I've heard like there's over 700 HOAs. and-
This is just a sample. This isn't all the HOAs that we have information on,
Okay,
but this
but-
is
But you have a point of contact on,
for some, Steve. Some have gone defunct
okay.
altogether, and some, was it, Tim, I think you were saying that your HOA doesn't really do anything, but then Nick, you were saying your
Yeah.
HOA was,
We have an HOA. Yeah, there's about 3 people that show up to meetings and 7 people and.
exactly,
and
so.
7
And
houses.
highly
but-
entertaining,
And
be
this is
very
different.
active, depending on the issues
So-
you're passionate about.
So there's the end of the
Raising rates,
spectrum that
yeah.
we have, that we experience, right?
Yep.
It's we have dark, we have nothing, right, from the ones that are defunct. We have ones probably like yours that we don't even have up-to-date contact information because there's only 2 or 3 people.
Mhm.
And then we have ones like yours that we know a lot about.
I think HOAs are a good way to go. My only concern is that what certain HOAs care about may not be part of our 2025 action plan. Like, for example, a neighborhood where the trees are dying because they're not the right species for the area, and the neighborhood's thinking of replanting them, that's under the urban forestry management plan, which is not one of our priorities for next year.
Right.
Yeah,
And we don't wanna, we don't want to put you in a place where you're in a pseudo staff role and you get asked questions like that, right? Where you are there talking at this very high level. So I don't know, do we wanna look at the PowerPoint real quick?
Yeah, it'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see it.
see it.
I'd like to say something about HOAs. I think there's gonna be HOAs that you call them, who, I don't know whether the city would call them up or probably they would, and ask them if they wanted to hear a presentation on city's sustainability plan or whatever you wanna call it. You might get, a no thanks,
Mhm.
but if you get, it seems to me, if you get somebody saying, oh, that's not a bad idea. You don't have to talk to the entire HOA. Matter of fact, if you didn't have a room with more than, say, half dozen people, I would call that a success because those half dozen people have got neighbors. If they hear what you have to say and they like it, they're gonna talk to their neighbors and it's gonna spread. In politics, they say that if you go talk to your legislature is gonna figure that you represent 50 votes for him. Just one person talking to him. So if you get 50 people walking in, he's looking at a couple thousand votes. He's gonna listen to you. And I think you could probably come up with some sort of similar metric when you talk to an HOA or you're talking to somebody who's got neighbors. So I see that as a positive, a reason why you should do that. Now, the message has got to be short, succinct, and powerful, obviously. And that's my understanding what we're gonna do now.
I mean, Rose is gonna be really jealous how you guys are setting this up every. So this is another place, again, we are looking for your feedback and your thoughts, right? This is not, as you can see from the top part here, we're expecting this to be revised and for you all to have ideas, and I'm expecting Rose is gonna watch this and make those changes, so. The idea for this presentation is you could take it around to an HOA, you know, to a variety of different things, so. Thank you for driving, Rich. The why, right? Again, just making really clear, this is the why, and this is what's happening with climate change. And we are seeing it, as you all know, right? The next page. I think it's really important that we are evangelizing the climate action plan, because you all have said that before, right? Your neighbors and friends and family members don't necessarily know what the climate action plan is. So let's make sure that we're telling people what it is, right, and what it does and what our goals are. And then the next slide is that where we are now, right, and this is really what shows, to me at least, that it's up to, you know, all of us as residents of Sammamish to really do this work, because that's really where the carbon emissions are, right? And then where we're headed, right, with our goals, right? I think this one's really key is because, and you all have had this conversation, right? It feels so big. How on earth are we ever gonna do this? Well, the Washington Clean Energy Transformation Act is gonna take a huge part of this wedge, and I should probably ask Steve to speak to this, because you're more well versed in this than I am, but you know, again, there are significant things that are happening that
Well-
will change this wedge, right?
If you go back a chart, you notice that the electricity disappeared in 2030.
Mhm.
And it's not because we did it, it's because Puget Sound Energy went carbon neutral per
Right.
state law.
Right, exactly, and that's what that CETA
Yeah.
on the next slide.
So-
Right, that's what that CETA is
Yes.
that's forcing PSC to go green, right? So I know we've had lots of conversations about, oh, these goals seem so big, but again, there are other things. We are all responsible to help make this happen, but there are other things that are happening that are gonna make this change too, right?
One of the things that I would suggest is that these two charts be, that you need, when you show this chart and you talk about it, people go, okay, that's how dirty we are. Then you show this chart, they're gonna wanna know, okay, where am I in there? And really, you're in this blue part and you're in this part. This is your electricity and this is your natural gas.
Right.
This also might be your ICE car.
Yep, yep,
So relating these two charts, I think is kind of should be kind of a key feature of this presentation.
okay, I
Yeah,
think that's
I'm-
really helpful.
I'm sorry, but I've spent 40 years being a PowerPoint engineer. And Nick knows what that means.
I appreciate that, and again. We want you all to be the ones giving
Yeah.
these presentations, right? And so these need to be. First of all,
Yeah.
you are all here exactly for that reason, is to provide us input and help us. Improve
There's-
these, but then also,
Yeah, I don't know if
Using it
this
to
is
be
an
out there.
appropriate time to say it, but one of the things you might encounter as you go out and proselytize and make this presentation is the occasional climate denier.
sure,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you advertise, you're gonna talk about climate change or the community's climate action plan. Chances are, every once in a while, you're gonna get a denier that's gonna come and wanna ask zinger questions.
yep,
So you gotta be ready for him.
Yep. agreed. So then the next slide is really talking about, these are ways, trying to make all of this concrete, right? Your changes in behavior, what we can all do to get that part of the wedge that we are responsible for, right? So our appliances, weatherization in the built environment, right? Transportation, smart technologies, and then other different processes. So trying to bring that down to what does that actually mean? Well, this is what it means. And then back to those other benefits, right? There are benefits beyond, climate, but your own health, right? Lower bills, right? Additional jobs, enhanced equity, that sort of thing. So,
This is, I think, where we need to start.
you want to start with the
This is
human?
my opinion. So I,
Bottom line up front,
yeah, well, not even bottom line up front. This is the part that like, we just kind of talked about
Yeah.
the subject, we talked about, this is what's gonna matter to people.
Right,
I'm with you on the charts. They
Well-
fascinate me.
A PowerPoint presentation has to do three things. The first chart is you tell them what you're gonna tell them,
Yes,
then you tell them,
then you remind me.
and then you tell them what you told them.
I get it. But
but you guys don't
But-
use PowerPoint charts.
no, we write 6-page documents. And they're all 50 pages when you're done. But no, I spent 7 years in the Air
The
Force.
format's not
and
much
doing-
different.
That's PowerPoint major.
Yeah.
Right, so I get it,
Yeah.
and I understand the messaging, but this is the messaging.
I
Like,
think
it's-
if we're trying to, we're
it's
appealing to a
not-
consumer, to a
it's
mass
not-
consumer.
I can explain those charts to people.
yeah,
Those charts aren't gonna sway anybody to do anything.
Right.
right,
It's, you start with, I'm from the Sammamish Sustainability Council, and I'm here to tell you ways I can save you money.
Well, I think it will,
Or-
my next door neighbor who's a
Yeah.
Meta, who's a
Yeah.
program manager at Meta,
Yeah.
but not to his kids, right?
Yeah, but like, this is why,
yeah,
here are the programs that are being offered that are helpful to you.
Right.
And guess what? They help us deliver the cap. I'll tell you about the cap at the end if you want.
mhm,
It's a thing, it's great, the city's trying to do it, and we're promoting it because part of the cap, but this is why it benefits you.
yeah,
We have savings for heat pumps, we have whatever for your health, right? Like, these are the things, like, this is where you hit home.
mhm.
And you tell them why it's good for them, and then it also helps the city.
So your theme is money savings.
Whatever savings, like
Yeah.
whether it's money savings, improved health, the thing that matters to the people. Because it's, those charts, they motivate me, but they don't motivate the normal human being.
I agree with everything you've said, but to Rachel's point of getting lost in the detail, what would be helpful for me is what problem are we trying to solve as a community greenhouse gas reduction, and what does my house contribute to it, and how can I reduce that to help with the goal? I don't see that yet in what I've seen here, but
Well, there's only one more slide, so let's look
Okay.
at that and then we can talk about the whole thing, right? Cause
Okay.
here's what you can do. Right? Weatherize. When it's time, change your HVAC, right? Your water heater, same thing, and then the EV. I think to your point, Tim, and I think that's a really good one, is like, we should be talking about then all the ways that we can help you, or when I say we, the global we.
Yeah.
You know, the rebates for whether for, you know, appliances, the incentives for EVs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, like talk about the IRA, right?
Yep.
Fingers crossed that's still a thing in a year and a half or whatever, but
Or,
like all the
30
all the
days.
tax rebates.
Yeah.
Do that, yes.
yes, right,
But like, yeah, like talk about this, like
Right.
here's the thing you can take advantage of
Right.
to do it. Here's
Yep.
how you get someone to come in to tell you your 100-year-old house, this is where your 100-year-old house sucks from a
yep,
weatherization standpoint, so you know what to do about it, cause
Right.
it's gonna save you money, like.
Yep.
I can't get my energy bills down, I can't figure it out, I don't know where I'm losing, where my money's going, I don't know what's going on.
yeah,
I need somebody like that's gonna
Right.
be like, what the heck's happening?
right,
Um,
right,
Like, tell them how to go do those things, and then how it's gonna benefit them, and then you're like, oh, and we need these 3 things to happen from a city standpoint, to hit our goals, and this is gonna help that too, so that's cool, but
Yeah.
really, it's really gonna help you.
Maybe another viewpoint would be the chart that's in the, well, it used to be in the, now it's the East Side Challenge, used to be the Sammamish Challenge, that compute your own carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Wonder how many
Okay.
people do that.
Well.
Yeah.
I don't know what the last count was, this is a couple hundred out of 22,000.
yeah,
it's so complicated.
it's too complicated, we're not gonna continue with that, and the other East Side cities are also gonna let it go, it's too
much.
it's too much to ask for somebody to go in and put their electric bills in, and
It's-
I know
I
you,
don't-
you enjoyed it, I'm sure.
And then but you have to redo it too.
Right.
Keep going.
Right.
Which makes it
Sure,
worse.
my
And to your point about the IRA, Infrastructure Reduction Act, I mean, I see the momentum swinging towards plug-in hybrids, not necessarily pivoting towards EVs, and there are lots of naysayers out there that say, you know, well, when you look at the overall life cycle footprint of an EV compared to an ICE car, and then you look at how much stress EVs putting on the grid, and you know where the power is coming, it's a complicated conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you gotta be able to get, we need to be knowledgeable enough to get into the details of this conversation. It's like,
Yeah.
it's, the grid is gonna be improved with the IRA. So it's all part of that huge thing where like, we will have the investments over time that can support it. We have to keep going and keep investing in it.
Yes,
all that. So
and
it's-
but AI computing is gonna consume
Sure.
a massive amount of power in our grid.
it
4%. That's it.
4%.
Yeah.
Where's that from? Is that based on today's?
Well, it's based on a projection made in, I'd have to get you the reference, but I've read numbers like, it's not Seattle Times, it's a peer reviewed document. But it's not that much.
But doesn't that depend on where you are?
Well,
Because the grid is kind of complicated.
well, there are about a dozen different, what they call independent system operators in the country. That are the ones that run the overhead transmission lines.
Okay,
So Puget Sound Energy, for instance, has got facilities to generate electricity.
sure.
And they have to get it from one place to another. So you have these overhead transmission lines that deliver to substations, and it gets distributed. And that distribution network is generally owned by the utility. So the big line that runs down 228th, that's owned by Puget Sound Energy.
Yeah,
But
but I don't
The-
see any data centers in Sammamish.
yeah, true. But if you go to Eastern Washington,
Oh,
they've
of course.
probably planned over there. I do know that Boeing's got in Quincy, it's got a pretty massive computing center there.
4%, wow.
So
So I'm
other,
talking nationwide, 4%.
right, I mean, I think there's really good feedback on the presentation, and again, we wanna make this.
Yeah.
Presentation towards you all, so I think going in with what this means for you first, I think that's I think that's right on and very powerful.
Yeah, like this first one, this is great. But tell me the incentives.
Yep.
Like say the average is $2,000 or whatever, like why just use that word and not give it, like dollar
Right.
signs are better,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're giving them tangible numbers.
Those are the things, yeah, that we want.
Yep.
That a user in my world that we want.
Yep.
Like a user is gonna react to that. They're not gonna react to this.
I think that's great. Very good feedback. Exactly what we were looking for.
On the
today.
health stuff, if we can somehow convince, some parent that it's gonna save, their kid that has asthma, a trip to the ER, for health. I mean, I know that that's pretty big, hairy, audacious goal, but if we can somehow put it around, wrap it around that, that would be, I think, pretty compelling for a lot of people.
Mhm.
For those of us that when it's all terrible outside, have to stay indoors.
Right.
One thing that I notice on this chart, you don't talk about are gas stoves. Somebody's gonna say, or ask you, are you gonna take my gas stove away?
Nope, we're not and we can't.
I
So,
know.
and I will share with all of you, not surprisingly, we've seen a little uptick in
Yeah,
people interested in either adding a gas generator, diesel generator, right, to their or swapping out their electric cooktop for a gas cooktop. Because of what you all just went through over these past couple weeks, so I think that's gonna be with us for a little bit. So,
I have a gas generator. This one,
yeah,
never lost power.
well, and one of the things we're gonna talk about later on is solar. We're starting a new solar campaign, and the solar and the battery technology, and Steve, I'm gonna look at you again, you probably know this better than I do, right? But it's that Tesla battery banks and things like that, there may be some opportunity here when we're doing our messaging to talk about like, hey, you're thinking about this, what about this kind of a thing too, right?
Mhm.
Because we are doing a solarized campaign, but again, we'll talk about, that's kind of similar to some of this other stuff too, that provide some opportunities.
Yeah, to learn more about that.
Other thoughts on the presentation as we collectively ways to Rose in the future?
There's no, well, okay, so there's a reference to Energy Smart East Side, but I
Mhm.
think, okay, I don't know anything about heat pumps. Where do I find out more? I know we've got lots of information out there, so we should probably have a website reference as well, right? So we make this kind of standalone. Federal incentives available. Where are they available? How do I find them?
Should there be, for questions like that, should there be some backup charts?
Yeah, maybe there's just a
Somebody
reference.
asked-
And maybe that's the postcard,
yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then that could be the take home, right? And the postcard is also, one side of the postcard is the why, right? The last slide that we just looked at, some version of that. And then the other side is this, but with also, to Tim's point and to your point, with the numbers,
Yeah.
the cash, and then also where to get more information.
Yeah, 'cause I'd like to see what does it cost to power an EV over a year versus what it would cost to put gas in a car? And there's a premium to buy an EV, and what's the payout on that? It's own it for a year, 5 years, or 10 years.
Yeah, and that would sort of, you'd have to do some sort of
That's the
apples
reference
to apples
list.
comparison,
Yeah,
but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
But those are all out there.
oh, sure.
Yeah, staff don't have to do
yeah.
that.
Because
Right.
Find it.
people in this area are very well educated. There's a lot of engineers,
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of very smart people in Savannah. So
Absolutely.
this is a good start, I think, but there needs to be like how do I find out more about this stuff?
Yeah.
I'm interested. Yeah.
Yep, I think that's all very good, very good feedback.
Got that, Rose?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Rose from the future, we can all say hello. Any other thoughts about the outreach plan? Or, I heard very clearly, no knocking on doors, so we'll focus on one sort of outreach event per quarter, plus the regular events. And then, we'll do some sort of postcard from and target some communities, right? Do a postcard, and then you all become video stars for our social media and. all
Yeah,
that.
and I have no problems going and talking to you. I've actually done some of this. I've got my own presentation that I presented to various groups. Not hostile, friendly. But I did get a couple of zinger questions, I'll say that.
About,
Well, one guy asked me, how do I know it's human caused? What's the evidence that suggests that us humans are really the reason why CO2 is going up?
okay,
Well, as a geologist, I can tell you over geologic time, there have been periods where CO2 has increased due to volcanic
Yeah, but
activity and
how-
other things.
But that's natural.
Yeah,
Now, how can you demonstrate or show, provide evidence that?
well, you can look at ice cores from poles where you can go back in time and look at slices of the atmosphere.
But how do you know that what's been going on since the dawn of the industrial age, that this increase is due to burning fossil fuels?
It's the
That's-
speed.
Hmm?
The speed at which the changes happen.
Yeah.
And that, the speed happened
Yeah.
started picking up right at the dawn of the industrial age.
And there's
Rapidly been increasing.
there's some, what I would call evidence that would convict you in a capital crime that would suggest that it is human caused. One is the ratio between the two naturally occurring isotopes of carbon, carbon 12 and carbon 13. They're changing, and the only way they change is if you're diluting the carbon 13 in the atmosphere with carbon 12. Where the carbon 12 comes from is from the plants that got turned into the oil and natural gas a zillion years ago, and now we're sucking it, mining it out of the ground and burning it. And another one is you can just do bookkeeping. There are plenty of people around the world that track how much fossil fuel we burn, and you can calculate how much of that would end up in the atmosphere, and then you can compare it with measurements of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and they equate very well. But you will get this question,
I'm
and
sure.
it's
Yeah.
you know, and this is the kind of question that the non-scientist soccer mom might ask you, and I don't mean to pick on.
I'm a non-scientist soccer mom, I get it.
Anyway, that's why I think some backup charts might be appropriate, you know, just have them in your pocket.
We're not gonna condense everything.
No, I know you won't,
Success
because
is not that.
having attended a number of farmers markets and having some people come by who are definitely
Some pointy
deniers.
questions.
Yeah,
Looking at what ChatGPT has to say for this answer. Going back to the growth of AI, right?
Right.
But it
That's
answers the
funny.
question.
Okay, and
Do you want me to read it? Oh,
yes,
sure, okay. So the
Yes.
question I put was, how do we know climate change is human caused? And the scientific consensus that climate change is primarily human caused stems from extensive research across multiple fields of study. Here's how we know. Greenhouse gas emissions. Humans have significantly increased atmospheric levels of greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide through activities such as burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial processes. Measurement of CO2 in the atmosphere show a sharp rise since the Industrial Revolution, coinciding with human activities. For example, CO2 levels have increased about 280 million parts per million at pre-industrial levels to over 420 parts per million today. So, you know, almost double. Isotopic evidence. The carbon in fossil fuels has a distinct isotopic signature, carbon 13, carbon 14, compared to natural sources. As humans burn fossil fuels, this fingerprint shows up in the atmosphere, linking the rise of CO2 directly to human activities. Climate models. Climate models can simulate historical and current climate and trends when only natural factors are considered. Models fail to explain the observed warming. Adding human-induced greenhouse gas emissions accurately reproduces the observed rise in temperature. So statistics. Warming patterns. The observed warming pattern matches what is expected from greenhouse gas-induced warming. The troposphere, which is the lower atmosphere, is warming, while the stratosphere, the upper atmosphere, is cooling. This is consistent with greenhouse gases trapping heat in the lower atmosphere, and nights are warming faster than days, another sign of greenhouse gas effects rather than natural variability like solar changes. Ocean heat. It keeps going. You want to keep reading?
No, we're done. Wow, okay, that was a lot.
Anyway, for
Very
me,
comprehensive.
you can quickly find these answers also.
Right,
Yeah.
But it's also better if they're right at your fingertips, but the tools are there
the tools are there.
to go answer these questions. And then if you ever use ChatGPT or anything else, be like, well, explain more about that, because the person comes back like, I don't think your carpet is 13, 14 thing,
And
how did we know
Too
that?
bad we don't have like our own Bill Nye, right?
Is
Well,
he from here? Didn't he become famous on the local?
Almost live.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you on that,
almost
right?
like, yeah.
Real nice, he's
Yeah.
good.
I do think, and I wanna make sure you all know that as a volunteer commission, right, you always have the ability to say, look, I'm a volunteer commissioner, right? I'm here to tell, help educate the community about, how we can make changes. If you wanna disagree with me, that's fine, but I'm gonna, so I'm just, you have a
Right.
different level of responsibility of engagement than
Yeah.
like a city, staff
Yeah,
member or an elected official would, so. I would encourage you not to be, I think Steve is right, be ready, right? But don't be too freaked out, because you do have the ability to say, look, man, this is not my day job, and walk away, right?
Promise it's our day job.
Well,
That
it
is
is
my
day
day
job.
job.
My
but
day, yeah.
In a different way.
David's day
you know,
job.
it's Yours, definitely.
It is mine, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but this isn't, so, in terms
Yeah.
of being out there and delivering, being the messenger for this.
Well, I will say, having been the recipient of some of these denier questions was kind of entertaining.
Well, if you have the right attitude,
But
yeah,
a lot of times you just can't convince the person,
Right.
and that's okay, agree
Yeah.
to disagree.
Right.
and-
Well, and I found out a number of things that the denier community is pointing to is what they call evidence that climate change isn't happening, that I was totally unaware of. One of them was Plymouth Rock is, it's because it's been there for supposedly 400 years, is still above sea level, which is not true. 2 times a day, it's below sea level. And it's also not true that it hasn't been moved, because when this guy said this, I didn't know anything about it. But apparently, because it's supposedly, according to them, still above sea level isn't rising, because otherwise it would be underwater. Well, what is it? Woods Hole is right near Boston, and they've measured in the last some 70 odd years an 8 or 9 inch increase in sea level. So that's something.
Florida,
my family has
Yeah.
a cabin on
And-
the coast that my mom built, and you can,
And-
for 30 years since then.
Yeah,
You can
and Plymouth
absolutely
Rock
see
has
it.
been moved several times and actually broken.
California coast.
Yep. Yep,
Anyway,
So-
those are the kinds of crazy questions you likely get.
And
Yeah.
there's so much misinformation out there, and disinformation.
Yeah.
There's some people that just go down that rabbit hole, and you're not gonna be able to pull them out.
well, unfortunately, there's a website to type in a question to get the answer you want for any answer that you want, right?
Zero statistics.
Other thoughts about the presentation or the outreach plan?
I would just need to think about it some more, this is the
Yeah.
first I see.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
this, I think we'll continue this conversation.
Yeah.
Let us make some,
I made this comment about the document, the
Okay.
climate action plan. These colors are atrocious for presentation. Especially when you couple it with the tiny print that's of the same color. It's almost, you put this up as a roof oil, on the wall. It's really difficult for somebody that's sitting far back to read. Make the print bigger and make it a contrasting color.
yep,
And the other thing I would say, with regards to word charts, the PowerPoint rule is 5 bullets, 8 words.
Yeah, it is pretty. long.
yep, some of these are a bit wordy, I
Yeah.
disagree.
I don't know how long we expect to get in these places, but this almost feels like a lot of charts too. A lot of pages, I guess. Like, this is a,
Well, this is about 15-minute presentation. It's not, it's not too bad.
9 slides,
It's not too
yeah.
bad. I mean, this chart's gonna be, and the previous one are gonna be the ones where you're spending a lot of time. Cause there's tremendous amount of detail in there.
So then we'll come back to you with some refinements for these. I would ask that you all spend a little time on these, right? And maybe lob in some thoughts to Rose or myself as we're doing these refinements. I know we're coming up on the slow time of year, so anyway,
whoa.
I know, give it some thought, so
Maybe,
Not your
maybe
business.
not for
Not,
all of
well,
us.
not even at work.
yeah, I know.
With kids,
I
this is
was,
like the worst time.
I know, it
Occurs
was a bit of a
nonstop,
joke
yeah.
there. Trust me.
October through December is the worst
Yes, yes,
for activities.
it is. Should we move on now? Good. So then the next part is we just wanted to give you all some updates on a couple of things. So first of all, a couple of very significant things happened in the city recently. One is which we passed the comprehensive plan, which the comp plan is a requirement, right, by the Growth Management Act. It provides a city or a county, any municipality, this is the map for how you are gonna grow moving forward, right? And this comprehensive plan for Sammamish incorporates some of the housing diversification stuff that came from the state that then we have implemented through the comp plan. We have very clearly shown that we have the ability to accommodate low and significantly low income housing in Sammamish in different areas, mostly areas that are either owned by the city or another public agency or a religious institution.
Okay.
So the comp plan is a big deal. So, and it did get passed, and so, and we also did the development regulations moving forward, so that's a big thing. It had to be done by the end of the year. It's not like we had any choice anyways, but it was a multi-year lift that was done, and if that is of interest to you all moving forward, you know, we do see one of the things that we're gonna start looking at is neighborhood centers, right? And so we have town center. You all know about town center. That's one area, right? But what can we do in some of these other areas to maybe densify them? So think of it's really it's the ones you all know, right? It's the Safeway, it's the QFC here, and it's continuing to build up Tahani, right? How can we make those potentially, right, more dense neighborhoods, right? So then you have more, if you have a more dense neighborhood, then if you build it, then the transit will come, right? But the transit's not gonna come first, right? Then you have folks who are living in places where they don't rely on cars as much and that sort of thing. And that is as we grow, right? Because we are gonna grow. That is another strategy for us to meet our cap goals. So if there's some interest in learning more about the comp plan, I could have one of my colleagues come in. We could have one of our colleagues come in and give you a little presentation in January or February.
I would love that.
Sure.
Cause I think there's some real opportunities there, and you know, gonna get one of the House bills, I'm gonna get it wrong, right? It did fundamentally change how cities can regulate land. If somebody comes in and says, I have a 7,000 square foot lot and I wanna build, 2 more units on my lot, basically, we have to allow that to happen, right? And that's part of that housing diversification and things like that. So now whether there's a market, it's a whole different issue, right? As we all know. But there's some real opportunities moving forward. So we'll put that on the agenda for January or February.
That'd be good.
Is there land conservation tied into the comprehensive plan, or is it just about economic growth and development?
There are different goals, yeah. There are
Okay.
different goals for sustainability, for land use, for housing. Transportation is another big thing. This city has never had a transportation master plan, which is a pretty common thing for a city to have. but there hasn't been able to be agreement over the years to create one, so we've started that this year. We've already docketed it for next year to know that we're going to be making some changes. One of the things that we're doing next year that I think this group is gonna wanna keep an eye on is our first bike and ped plan. So that's something as we think about, right, reducing VMT, how we better integrate bike and ped is gonna be important in that effort, right? So so transportation's a part of it. There's a number of different
Okay.
things that are a part of it, but you know.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned, somebody had mentioned in a prior meeting about, you know, how to get from here to the light rail station in Redmond and not have to drive.
Yep.
That's actually a great idea because then, you know, there'll be competition for parking probably at the train station, and if there's a way to get from point A to point B, you go into Seattle.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, think about World Cup coming up in a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
You are not gonna wanna have to drive to
Yeah.
World Cup, so. So we'll put the comp plan on the list. I think that would be of interest, and there are some things coming up. Again, the bike and ped plan. Doing some work on those neighborhood centers. Those are all things that I think this commission should have some interest and some visibility in as they move forward, so. The other thing we did was we adopted the 25-26 budget. Again, it's a requirement that we have to do at the end of the year. I will say though, this budget is the most transparent budget that we've ever done. We really, I think we had 11 or 12 meetings, you know, council meetings on budget. We did, like I said, we got feedback at the farmer's market and things like that, but we also significantly changed our budget we took out all the what ifs. So this is great. This is what I've been saying, and it came back to bite me. I've been saying, Sammamish always budgets for the meteor to come, right? We need to not budget for the meteor to come. We need to budget for what we know is gonna come. And then if the meteor comes in, we'll deal with it. Well, we just had a $2.3 million meteor that hit us, because that's about where we are right now with our storm.
Wow.
Our storm is only ours. We're at about 2.3.
That's just the
That's
cities.
just the city. We think that's our forecast.
That seems low to me,
We're gonna-
given the damage.
So, but that's just that's not like damage to houses and, you know,
Sure.
all of that kind of stuff. But
in terms of like, you know, Rose and the sustainability team at the city, did the budget increase, stay the same, decrease?
so what we did was, it stayed about the same. So it's a little bit less, but we also have some grant money that we're using to offset it, right? We're gonna be able to do everything that we have in that work plan that we showed you, right? And we're adding this solarized campaign. And then we did have one council member add in some additional funds for sustainability efforts as it relates to the city's carrots and sticks, right? The potential for a incentive, you know, some sort of incentivization program for buildings, as well as what additional regulations can we look at? And so that's gonna be what we are gonna do with those additional funds is add them to already existing programs. So for instance, many of you know that we're relooking at town center right now and seeing if there's some, right now the cap is 2,000 units, right? We're gonna do a supplemental EIS to look and see whether or not we wanna add additional units. Again, for that density issue, right? With that also comes changes to the town center development regulations, right? Maybe we wanna look at increasing the requirements for EVs in multifamily buildings, right? So right now, you have to have, not the requirements for EVs, but the requirements for EV chargers.
Chargers, yeah.
So right now, I think it is, you have to have 10% of the parking in a multifamily has to be EV ready to go. You could drive your Rivian up there today, plug it in, right? 10% has to be EV ready, which means the electricity is all there, you just don't have the charger, right? So you just gotta put the charger in. And then the other 10% has to be, I don't remember what it is, but basically the conduit is there. So the wire's not in there, but the conduit to run the wire is in there. You run the wire and all that, right? So maybe we wanna look at increasing that, right? As a part of the changes to the town center. That's where we would add in that additional sustainability fund.
Okay.
Similarly, when we're looking at the neighborhood centers, right? There may be some, maybe we want to create an incentive program for green buildings, right? So if you build a LEED platinum building, you get more density than you would if you built a regular building, right?
Mhm.
Or you get you get 50% off your permit costs if you build a living green building or whatever. So
Those are great.
so those are some things that we're gonna be kind of chewing on over these next couple of years, and they're not gonna be their own program, they're gonna be within these other work plan items that we're working on. So, and then the other thing that's really key about this budget is because we're not budgeting for those what ifs anymore, right? The budget increase from this current biennium to the next biennium was 0.7%, right? Like we have not significantly raised the budget over this next biennium. But it is also not sustainable, right? For the level of service that we have in Sammamish. We've been talking for a while now about the lines are gonna cross at some point in terms of our revenues and our expenses, and we're there, right? So we are spending our savings account this coming biennium in order to continue this level of service. I wanna say it's 14 million, but you can't hold that to me, but that's pretty significant, right? So as a part of the budget, we did talk to the council about new revenue. And so we are going to be bringing a utility tax forward in the beginning of the year to be able to get those revenues back up to our expenses. And we are not the only ones going through this. If you watch the news or talk to your neighbors in Issaquah just laid off cut 18 positions, right? Tacoma's cutting a bunch of positions. Issaquah's also, they do have a utility tax, but they're raising their utility tax. Sammamish has a number of revenue options that it's never used before, right? We're a relatively young city. We've been able to rely on property tax, but many of you know that property tax grows only at 1% plus new construction, right? And that's limited by state law. So what that 1% equals to is about $300,000. So we'll get about $300,000 more in 2025 than we did in 2024 for property tax, which is nothing, right? To be honest. So, you are gonna hear, more discussion about revenues. The utility tax isn't gonna be enough, right? The utility tax is gonna help us stabilize, but we're gonna have to have some other, either another revenue source, or we're gonna have to talk about significantly changing our services. So, and unfortunately, the way that municipal services works is the first ones on the cutting blocks are the ones that everybody loves, because we have required services that we have to do, right? We have functionally required service we have to do. You have to have AP, right? Then you've got this level of service dial you can adjust, right? So we could talk about fire, police, things like that. But then you've got these things that are really important to the community: communications, parks, sustainability, right? Those are the ones that aren't on that required list, right? Right now,
Cleaning my street.
cleaning your street. Right now, the council and that fiscal sustainability task force that we had last year have all said, keep the level of service the way it is. And so that's what we're currently working under. But we're gonna have a lot more conversations about this next year. So just wanna make sure you all know what's going on.
I've always been impressed when there's first snowflake, clouds come through. That may change.
That is gonna change. We have, just so you know, just in case the first snowflakes come in the next few weeks. We are focusing more on priority routes, and you're not gonna see us in your cul-de-sacs like you used to, right? Unless all the priority routes are completely clear. So, and that's, we're talking about, we're talking about the usual storm we get. I'm not talking about an Armageddon snowstorm, so.
All right, I live on a hill. I love skiing powder in my neighborhood when they don't plow the streets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think resiliency is a part of sustainability that we haven't really started talking about as a group. And that is something that we should start talking about as a group, because that has, that a lot of things that happened in this community over these past couple of weeks too could have also been mitigated if everybody had their kits, right, and had all their emergency stuff at home, had enough food, right, all of that, had a generator, right? Good to have a generator.
It's great.
Yeah.
Home came with it, it was nice. Benefit from someone else's.
We're all
investment.
going to your house.
Exactly.
Right.
My electric stove kept working.
Any questions about any of that? So.
Thanks for the update.
So the last thing we want to talk about is this Solarize campaign. You can skip the program. Yeah, and we'll just go directly to the presentation. So this is being added to the overall East Side Climate Partnership effort that we're working on, right? And the you know, right now we've had a big focus on heat pump and electric conversion, right? So we're adding this Solarize. So it's called the Solarize East Side. We're working with a nonprofit called Olympia Community Solar. They've done this with other municipalities. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Rich. So it's basically a way for communities to, we get somebody in who can provide the education and then provide the connections to vendors, to rebates, to all of that kind of stuff, right? Our role in this is to, you know, probably a couple times a year, we'll host something in the chambers or things like that to say, you know, come learn about this. So next slide. It really is a way just to make this transition easy for people. So if you're solar curious, right, we're gonna get you in the door and hopefully, you know, get you on the grid, off the grid, whatever. Next slide. Here's some, these are a couple of communities that have done this work, as you can see, and they've had some fairly successful installations going forward.
Is that successful?
I
don't know.
would say Thurston would be successful.
Yeah,
So-
seems like it, I guess. It's certainly not nothing.
It's not nothing,
Yeah,
right? And
I'm
it
not
doesn't,
Trying to minimize
it's
it.
not costing us anything. So, so that's good. It's really just, you know, staff time.
Yeah.
So,
But, yeah,
next
anything
slide.
better
So
than that.
here's the role, right, of Olympia. So it's when there's a negotiating special pricing, right? I mean, it's a bulk, it's buying in bulk, right? Sure. Kind of what it is, right? Education and promotion, right? And then, you know, like we just talked about, doing like community events and meetings and stuff like that. And then this is our role, right? Oversight, participate in meetings.
Was there a meeting on this recently?
No,
Oh,
this
okay.
isn't us. This is a different
I like the thing.
community.
Kenmore.
Like the
Kenmore,
slide and the
yeah.
picture.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right,
okay,
right,
there we go.
right.
It looks
Yeah,
kind of like.
It does look like
Yeah.
chambers.
Yeah.
So like this could potentially, if we're gonna pick our neighborhood and we're gonna do 4 targeted mailings a year to that neighborhood as a part of the commission outreach. This may be one of the things that we do,
Mhm.
right? Is, hey, come to one of these solar event type of events, right?
So how? I don't know, a couple of years ago, I got a bid for solar from Rams. And it was sticker shock. So obviously I didn't do it. So I'm wondering, I mean, are they gonna, with the bulk buying? Do they have to get so many people in the community to sign up before it goes, or?
No, it's really, when I say bulk buying, it's really more about. It's getting all of those solar curious people in one
Yeah,
room so that it makes them coming to that event more advantageous for
Okay.
them. Does that make sense?
so
I mean,
that this Olympia, they're just facilitators.
yes,
It's gonna be somebody in the installation business that actually does. the work.
yes, so they're helping, right, they're, if you go back one slide, they're helping to negotiate those pricing, securing the partnerships,
Okay.
right? All of that kind of stuff.
So is the hope that a lot of people will sign up and they can, by virtue of a lot of business, they can keep the prices down?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, one thing I'd be curious about is you know, when solar first kind of came on the scene, I don't know, 25 years ago, these panels covered an entire roof of a house. I would have hoped by now the footprint would be a lot smaller, but I'm not sure it is.
Not from what I've seen recently,
Yeah,
in my
the-
neighborhood.
The bid I got, nobody ever came out to the house. They just went on Google Earth
Mhm.
and looked at my house. And I gave them some information about what my electricity use was. So they just sized the system. And they pretty much covered the part of the roof that either faces west or south. Problem is I have a little stand of trees that's to the west of me that covers up part of my south facing roof. So I'm sure the number of panels is gonna be more based on where you're located. Are you
Mhm.
deep in the trees or are you
Right.
out in the?
And you know, we've talked about, you know, the UFMP and the tree regulations in 2026 and that sort of thing, and there is a natural tension between our tree regulations and solar,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And so those are things that we're all gonna have to talk about and think about.
And HOAs probably too.
And
Yeah.
HOAs, yeah. However, I think it's worth starting to have, you know, familiarize this within the community and see if we can get more
Well,
folks on.
It's
On
state
solar.
law that HOAs cannot prohibit you from putting solar on your roof
Yeah,
Yeah.
that changed in
fairly recently.
I'm gonna say 2018.
Yeah, I don't know the
Something
year,
like
but
that.
it's,
It's good to know.
But if they require you to have X roof that's not compatible with solar, that might could be a workaround.
yeah, there might be a bit of a problem there.
So, but anyway, so this is gonna kick off next year, and I think there's some real opportunity, and then also, I know many of you are metrics folks, so this will be something we'll be able to track too, right?
Mhm.
So we'll be able to see whether or not we see any uptick in you know, solar in permits and that sort of thing, so. So we're excited about this, it's good stuff.
Not to be a naysayer, but 2030, Puget Sound Energy is clean, so supposedly, why bother?
Because of what happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a reason. Well, but so my point being is that you probably need some gimmick to grab them. In my view, the gimmick is all of a sudden my electricity bill goes to basically zero.
Right. Yep,
And you know what you're paying a month, right?
I think your return for solar is probably faster than your return for.
Oh, yeah,
For the
Yeah.
heat pump,
For
I
the
would agree with that.
if you have the sun.
They used
If
to
you
be,
have,
yeah, in the summer, if you you pushed energy back into the grid, you used to
Right.
get credits
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
it, right? And I would argue this time of year, how effective is your solar power system gonna be in your house? I don't know the answer to
Well,
that.
I heard from a neighbor of mine, from his brother who has solar on his roof in San Diego. When the moon is full, he actually is generating electricity.
Hmm.
So these, I
So
don't
from that
know,
standpoint, they've gotten a lot better.
huh?
But Rachel mentioned something about like battery storage capacity.
Yeah.
Has that technology been merged with solar and?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
oh,
Okay.
definitely.
That's how you.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
alright.
even, I mean, I have a very small, very small system on my very in the woods cabin. And I've never gone below 50. I mean, I'm not charging all of this because I'm in the
Right.
middle of nowhere, but for what I need.
Yeah.
And I'm in the woods and it's tiny,
Hmm.
so, and it's all battery.
It's good to know.
Yeah, I had a story similar to yours. I had some people I called some companies to look at my house and they're like, the only way you put solar on your house is if you cut down all these trees.
Right.
Cause you just have too much shade. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'd rather have the trees.
Right.
Wait till they fall on your house.
Yeah.
Thanks. Luckily they didn't this I don't know if it's gonna happen.
I'm glad they
Go
did.
down in a 70-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah.
this one was just February.
Yes, it was.
I give the city credit, cleanup that they're doing.
Our crews have been on 10-hour shifts for
Long time.
weeks.
Yeah, 228 was quite a project. Yeah.
2/28 was quite a project, and
They did great.
there's
That's
a
just.
20th was a war zone.
20th was kind of frightening looking, even parts of 212.
We did a presentation to council on Tuesday night that Scott, the city manager, went through, but the PowerPoint's available on the website. If you just want to click through, you can, it really gives you an idea of. I think a lot of people in the city didn't necessarily know how widespread it was, right? People knew that their neighborhoods were hit. But there's one slide in there that at 3 AM, it was like, boom, every road is closed, basically.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think it was 1996. The storm wasn't as big as this one, but
Yeah.
it was pretty substantial.
Yeah, I heard.
Wind
about that
came
one.
right through the,
Yeah.
between Tiger and Squawk Mountain.
Hmm.
And on Southeast 24th, which is kind of the main road in and out of my neighborhood, if you drove past 244th where the Beaver Lake Fields are,
Mhm.
it looked like every tree, the road was just, there was just lined up all the way down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember on what is now 32nd as you start going around Pine Lake. 100-foot high fir trees that literally the root ball was nested up against the power poles. That was
Yeah.
just before we had, you know, a lot of these.
Right.
That took these photos and I was just like, oh my God, it's wild. Well, I brought it on because my husband and I decided to watch Twister, the sequel, the night before the
Twister.
storm. Yeah, so that
I
was,
don't know.
so that was my fault. We have one more, looks like.
I think we're pretty much done.
Long-term
We covered it, right?
calendar. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
any
We've never
reports?
finished early.
I know.
What's happened? It's this Rose Bowl.
So this electrification resilience sustainability question, Q&A matrix, 5/19/24, 5/9/24. Was curious as to, was that a question somebody asked of the city council?
The most recent one.
Well,
Are we looking at that one,
it's the second
page
to
19?
27, page 27.
Oh, there, okay.
This is Pam's question.
Oh,
And I think yeah, looks like we need to change the date on that.
Oh, what did they do?
This was the email question that you had. It was basically, you know, whether or not, you know, given the obvious reliance on electrification, whether or not the city was going to further regulate and or take away, right?
Hmm.
You know, and we're not, right? Again, this is about changing hearts and minds. The city is not able to go and knock on your door and say, you are no longer able to use electric anymore, right? So the building code, you know, is makes some changes with new construction. Many of you probably saw that yesterday, the opponents of 2066
Yeah.
did file an injunction to stop the implementation of that bill, which with that initiative, which could have had some may have some implications on things, but no, this is about changing hearts and minds. It's not about regulating our way out of this because A, we can't, and B, you know, we have folks who aren't interested in doing that, and that's not a way that we're gonna do this at this point, so.
Yeah, 2066, just the way it was written.
Right.
Very confusing.
Not on the agenda, but do you have a question about succession planning for this team? I think we found out October, November that Paul left the commission, and I
Right.
understand there's some backfilling in progress. Are there interviews going on, or have they already happened with the city council, or?
So, not yet, so applications, if you're
Yeah.
reapplying, I'm looking at two of you,
Are you,
right,
are
or do
you
you?
guys, your
They're-
terms
There's
up?
only one term.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So when you start a new commission, you have to stagger it, so otherwise you end up with everybody on the
What?
same cycle.
Yeah,
Right, so,
I missed that meeting.
you
so,
just weren't
so
quick enough.
these two, Jared and Pam, had only 1-year terms to begin with.
okay.
So, I think they're due January 10th, but don't you can't quote me on that, but, at the February council meeting, the council will do the interviews of folks who have put their name in the hat for the sustainability.
You said it's
commission.
February?
Yeah,
Oh, February,
at the
okay.
February
Okay.
meeting. So I think we've had 2 applications so far. One of which I do believe is the person that you had mentioned,
Yes.
the high school teacher.
Suzanne, I think.
Right.
I
What
met
was
her at
Paul's
Blue.
term? How many years was he?
I-
2? Okay. So there's
Yeah.
three positions.
correct.
Okay.
So Pam and Jared are, yes, and that your terms technically end at the end of January,
Okay.
right? And then Paul's term would have ended at the end of January 2026.
Okay.
You're the only lifer on here.
I don't know, it's-
Yeah, you weren't there, you didn't see what I did to him?
I think,
We got the most votes, so.
is that how,
Our illustrious mayor said, well, one of you's gotta do 4 years, the other one's gotta do 3 years. And I said, give me 3. And he's just sitting there flat footed.
That's pretty good, Steve.
I didn't know, this is my first time in doing anything city. You were always.
No, it's great.
You
You
know
gotta
what
be
was
quick,
coming. What's that?
quick,
Yeah, right.
or dead.
I just wanna make sure I give you the right,
I think it's January 6th.
January 10th.
Oh.
Applications must be submitted by 5 PM on Friday, January 10th.
And.
And-
Get on it.
So for all of you, right, but specific for the 2 of you, you can use what you turned in before and just say, just supplement it with, I've been an active participant, blah, blah, blah type of a thing. So don't feel like you have to,
Rewrite.
rewrite it.
I'll use ChatGPT.
So, right, so,
Good thing this is free. Volunteer work.
so then I think the only other thing is whether or not there were any,
Commissioner report.
any reports from any of you. So I think for next month, we'll obviously be talking more about the outreach effort, right, and continuing to hone in on that, and then, Rose and I will talk to our colleagues to see whether or not, we could do a comp plan type of a, update for you all there in next month.
Mhm.
I think that would be really good. And then I think February, right, we're gonna have at least 1 new person, right? So maybe sort of try to figure out some sort of work plan overview, get to know each other, that sort of thing, spend a little time. But also, right, that'll be right in the middle of that first quarter, so we gotta be doing stuff on that commissioner outreach effort too, so.
I have one thing. I went to the website for the Solar INC site. And then I looked at the people that signed up or that they've been serviced. And 3 of the electricity providers, utilities, are in counties or regions like Mason, Lewis, and what was the other one? Oh, Walla Walla,
Well,
where the electricity is clean. 90% of it's either hydro or nuclear. So if those people want to sign up for solar, now I can see Walla Walla because it's sunny over there.
it's sunny, Richland, Walla Walla, Kennewick.
Mason and Lewis, probably, they're on the side.
My husband and I driving up to Canada this summer. And I guess it was Blaine, up near Blaine. They're out of the rain, they're out of the Puget Sound region. I was shocked how many homes, big and small homes had solar. But again, I think, so agricultural will say they get a lot more sun.
Yeah.
And
It's the trees
Mhm.
here, which is great. But like,
well, and the trees and just the overall gray, because we're between the 2 mountain ranges.
But
Yeah,
even
but
with
even
the
red-
gray,
Yeah,
like,
like,
You get,
yeah,
my parents live in Trinity and I drive through
yeah,
in Redmond Ridge and
right,
yeah.
everybody's got solar there.
Right.
Because they don't have all the old growth trees.
They
'cause
have,
it-
yeah, because it's such a much
These-
newer area,
These little solar lights you can stick in your yard,
which we have one.
well, when they crap out, the solar cell's still good.
Yeah,
So I took the solar cell out, rewired it, and just hooked it up to a multimeter to see what it was, how much charge I was getting. It's substantial, even on a day like today.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
our little light hangs in there.
Yeah.
It's covered in snow.
So last year I sent some information to Rose and I'm happy to send it out to the group if anyone's interested. This coming April, there is a environmental innovation challenge that's hosted by Alaska Airlines and the University of Washington. I've been a judge for 10 years. It's like the Shark Tank for sustainability. And these are
Oh, yeah.
These are graduate student teams from all over the Northwest and West Coast, and they have built companies around themes, whether it's greenhouse gas reduction, alternative energy, waste diversion to landfills, and they are pitching their ideas for all these companies. So I'll give you one example. There was a company a few years ago that figured out a way to take bamboo and make paper products out of it, like toilet paper, paper towels, all this stuff, because they're a really fast replenishing source. And so there's been, some of these have gone into higher levels for like venture capital funding, and they've gotten a few of these companies off the ground. But for me, it's a reset. Like I get so inspired by how passionate the students are about all these environmental challenges, how they're gonna fix them. So if anybody wants more information, you want to be a judge, they're always
do.
looking for people.
Sure, sign me up.
It's at the Seattle Center. It's usually around late March, early April. I'll find out the date.
I used to be a judge for the UW business plan competition.
It's similar. It's similar. Yeah, yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
yeah. Okay,
So now,
I can send it
Yeah.
out.
I mean, I know Alaska's a big sponsor and I'm sure Boeing is too, because they've got their sustainable fuel initiatives going.
Boeing doesn't sponsor the Environment Innovation Challenge, but
Oh, okay.
but there are quite a few companies that do. Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Sure.
one thing for next year, that I'm interested, I don't know if anybody else is, but like you already talked about this idea to incentivize the, whether it's lead and get more, different ways to incentivize. I'd love to hear.
Like a green building program.
Yeah, what are other, and I get the budget thing, so
Yep.
maybe nothing, right?
Yep.
But other ways that we can incentivize and provide the carrots to get people to do
Mhm.
the things on here,
Mhm.
that slide deck would be great, like, cause if things like IRA goes away, like,
Right,
money drives things,
right,
right? Like,
Right.
and Steve made this point many times, like, if we can help people in some small way with something, like, that's a super powerful way to get people to make the change, that we want them to make to hit our goals, but actually have to realize that, so. I don't know if there's a further deep dive or whatever.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Rose from the future will put it on the list.
So there you go, thanks, Rose.
That's internally, that's how I've sold sustainable remediation projects, is the triple bottom line, that you can make a difference in the environment and not pay a premium to do that, right? And that's the business case on a lot of this stuff. And so how do you translate that to residential scenarios? Yeah, I agree.
Yep. I think that's part of why the solar is so interesting, because again, you can make that return so much faster. Right,
Well, I used to be a kind of neutral on the green power plant program, the PSCS. Until I read an article that says what that does is it forces PSC to start buying more renewable energy. So it's kind of cool, you know,
Right.
even though you're paying a little bit more, you're thinking, okay, I'm just paying this guy a premium for my electricity, but what you're doing is you're forcing him to go out and find some renewable energy.
Right. Yeah.
Which means that there's hundreds of renewable energy projects that are on the drawing boards that are in line to get hooked up to the grid. So now you've got some guy, big guy out there pushing to get that to happen.
Yep.
Powerful, great financing, I do it too, just for that reason.
Yep.
Right? Shall we move to adjourn? However.
That we're just hanging out.
I know. Or hanging, I'm like, I got more
We got
chocolate.
chocolate, right?
I
That's
got
what it's
chocolate.
about.
by common consent.
Oh, yes, by
Right.
common consent.
We'll adjourn.
We'll adjourn.
You're good. Yep, that's great. Thank you all very much.